I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about adding pizzazz to your favorite patterns. We'll cover 10 creative ways to customize patterns you already love, simple techniques that make a big impact, and how to make even basic garments feel uniquely yours. So whether you have go-to patterns you've sewn multiple times or you're looking to make simple basics more special, these ideas are going to help you create garments that truly reflect your personal style. All right, let's start with a relevant icebreaker for today, Hilly. What's a pattern you've sewn multiple times and how did you change it up?
Oh, there's so many seamwork patterns that I've sewn a lot, but they tend to be like basics, and I change them by just doing different fabrics. I think that one that I've made often that I always make a little bit different is it's an oldie. It's a seamwork, or it's a Colette pattern. It's the Laurel dress. And I have made that so many different ways. Different sleeve variations, neckline variations, adding ruffles, using eyelet. Like, I've done a lot with that dress over the years. I love something that has like a really basic but classic shape for these kind of like shape-shifting type garments, because I feel like it just is the perfect blank canvas.
Yeah, I like that too. And there are several seamwork patterns that I've made many times. I'm wearing one right now, which is the ash dress.
That's a good one.
3 times. A very simple slip dress, and I love slip dresses. And again, I just vary the fabric for the most part. I've made it in all 3 of my versions are in rayon challis, but because rayon challis comes in so many cool prints, they're all prints. And I love this dress. I think it's such a great one to play with. Even though I've basically just made the basic version, I think it would look really great if you shortened it or lengthened it. There's just so many things you could do. I think the next time I make it, actually, what I will do to change it up is add a shelf bra to it.
Oh, I love that idea.
Because it has a facing that goes almost pretty much all the way under the bust, a fairly long facing. I think it'd be really easy to make that in like a power net or something like that, and add some elastic and give it a shelf bra, because I really don't like strapless bras. I'm sure we've talked about this many times on the podcast. I don't like strapless bras.
They can be a pain.
Yeah, they never seem to stay up on me. So that's what I would do. But there's so many options with a simple pattern like this. The Laurel that you mentioned, changing up, I think we had years ago even an ebook or something that was different ideas for changing up the Laurel pattern and making it in different ways and adding details to it.
Yes, I remember this. I didn't work here when that came out, but I remember I worked at a fabric store and getting the email, because we would get the emails ahead of everyone else, and we were like, ooh, all of the possibilities.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to put together. All right, well, if you have an icebreaker for a future episode for us, you can leave it in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we will answer it in a future episode. So just let us know if you have a question that we could use for an icebreaker, and we'll add it to the show. All right, well, I think one of the most exciting parts of sewing is taking a pattern and making it your own, just like we've been talking about. Sometimes we kind of fall into the habit of just following patterns exactly as they're written, but there's just so much room for creativity once you start thinking about customization. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I have several patterns that I absolutely love, and I've made them multiple times, but I do want each version to feel different and feel a little bit special. And the thing is that small changes can actually have a really huge impact on the final look of a garment. You don't necessarily need to do major pattern alterations to create something that feels completely new. And then when you add these personal touches, you end up with garments that no one else has. They're just truly one of a kind. They're made to your specifications and your taste, but also to your creativity. And I think it's just really fun to have an idea and then bring it to life. It's sort of, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I feel like it's kind of a lot of people approach their pattern as, okay, here are the instructions, here's how to make this particular dress or whatever it is. But really, it's a collaboration between you and the designer of the pattern. You're working together to create something that matches your vision. So do you have any patterns that you return to the most, Haley? Like, is there one that you've made more than any other pattern?
Probably the Joss pants is one of my like most made patterns of all time. And I think that's because they really suit my lifestyle. They're like a pull-on elastic waist pant with a wide leg. And because I work from home like 3 to 4 days a week, and on my free time I'm chasing after two little girls, they just like really fit. But they also, I feel like you can really elevate them and make them, I have pairs that are like made out of rib knit that I just like wear for lounging. And I also have pairs that are like, linen. I really want to make a pair of like out of like a more like wool type fabric, and that you can like pair with a sweater or something, and they like feel like a little bit more elevated.
Yeah.
I love the Joss pants. I know you do too.
I do too, yeah.
What is your like tried and true most made pattern?
I think the one that I've made the most has probably been the Alice tee.
Oh yeah, that's good.
I've made several of those. I only had one that didn't turn out that I don't wear because I've made them all. Well, I've made several of them in rib knit, but this one was like a very, very stretchy rib knit. And the neckline got really stretched out when sewing it. I think I needed to stabilize it more. So live and learn. That one didn't come out. All the other ones I've made have been wonderful though, and I wear them all the time. I just really love a long sleeve fitted t-shirt to layer under things in the cooler months. So I wear those constantly. I wear them all the time, and I really, really love that pattern. But there are several seam work. I made the Joss pants multiple times. I'm making my third pair of Chelsea jeans right now. I've made a lot of our patterns multiple times, and usually I am varying something about them, changing something up about them, even if it's just a completely different fabric. But often it's the little details that you add.
What usually inspires you to customize a pattern instead of like sewing it as written?
I think for me, the more I get into the design part of sewing, which is I use the design your wardrobe process. So every season I go through that process and plan out what I'm going to make and really spend some time sketching things and making mood boards and really designing what I want to create, which I think is really, really vital for me and my creativity. But I think that has really opened up possibilities for me because I usually don't start with, there's this pattern that I like, or there's just this fabric that I like, and I'm going to find something to do with it. It's a lot more intentional. And I think about like a vision of what I actually want to create. And I start with that. So from there, I can find a pattern that more or less matches the style I want and think about how I can customize it to make it the way that I want it. So for example, one of the things on my fall mood board was I really wanted to make like a bias cut silk skirt that had a lace trim, like a wide lace trim at the bottom. So kind of like a slip style. And I chose to use the Desi skirt. And even though it's kind of a different style, it's much longer than what I had envisioned. It has a diagonal seam, which I eliminated. I made a lot of changes to it. I also changed the waistline. I added lingerie elastic instead of doing the encased elastic. Made a bunch of changes to it, but it became something that was a lot closer to what I had envisioned, even though if I had just made it out of the envelope, which I have done, I've made that pattern on its own, it looks pretty different. So that's kind of my starting point, is usually some kind of design process that I go through. What about you?
Yeah, I would say that lots of times I'll have a big picture vision for what I'm trying to achieve and then select the pattern and kind of like work backwards from there. And then other times I'm just drawn to a particular pattern. I really want to make it, but my like designer brain like rarely allows me to make something as is. And it's just to like, in those cases, it's usually to like suit a personal preference. Like maybe a particular neckline is not my most favorite on me. But I really see patterns as like a suggestion.
Yeah.
Rather than, like a concrete plan of how things have to go. But yeah, I would say like a design process is usually how I arrive on my customizations. Have you ever been nervous about making a change to a pattern that you love?
I think when you're changing up something that's more structural,
Yeah.
that's when it makes you a little bit nervous, but not necessarily bad nervous. It just means you have to do a little bit more testing to figure out if it's actually going to work. So it's a little bit more troubleshooting and less, adding a surface detail, for example. And you just you can visualize that very easily. But if something's going to change the fit or if it's going to change the structure significantly, those are things where you might get a little bit nervous. You might want to test things out or even ask for advice from other people, see what they think. So for example, for the Desi skirt that I just mentioned, I'm taking out that encased waistband, which is a separate piece, and I'm going to add lingerie elastic instead. And so I was kind of a little nervous about that because can I just eliminate that waistband? Will it fit the same? Or will I need to raise up the waist a little bit to make it fit the same, but then it's stretchy because of the bias. So I asked a few people what they thought before making that decision, and that really helped to give me a little bit more confidence about how it would look in the end.
Yeah, I always, we do sneak peek Zoom calls with our members where I share the new pattern about a week in advance of when it comes out. And a lot of those calls are people asking me about different things that they can do to customize it. And something that I talk about often is like the difference between a pattern hack and like pattern making. And because sometimes people will ask like, well, what if, like, they'll ask me essentially what would be like a redesign of the pattern, which I'm not like opposed to. It doesn't offend me as the designer in any way. But I always like tell them that one, it wasn't tested in development that way. Yeah. And two, like, it's probably within the realm of possibility, but we're bordering on pattern making and not pattern hacking. And in my mind, pattern making is when, like you said, you're changing structural elements of the garment. And those are the ones I get like a little bit, I don't know if nervous is the word, but I definitely know that I want to proceed with more caution. Yeah. And I definitely don't do those without making some prototypes.
That's, I think, the key thing. Even if you're delving into the realm of pattern making, there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to recognize you're going to have to do some testing to make that work.
Yeah, I think just kind of like identifying where that line is. And it's different from pattern to pattern, really. Some things you can tweak the fit of or the intended fit of a lot more easily. And sometimes, like if you're doing trousers, maybe not. Yeah. Maybe not so easily. Yeah, so that's always like a line that I'm thinking of when I'm customizing things. What's the most dramatic customization that you've ever made to a pattern? Speaking of pattern making.
That's a great question. Well, I've done a lot of pretty dramatic ones from vintage patterns years ago. And then, pattern making from scratch as well. So from, a block or from, a very, very basic pattern to something completely different. But I would say in recent years, the one that comes to mind, I don't know if it's dramatic, but one that comes to mind that I think the result looks quite different is my Chelsea jeans that I've made, because I changed the leg shape so completely, which doesn't necessarily affect the fit in the most important places around, the waist, the hips, the butt, all of that, because I love the fit of those jeans, but I changed the leg shape so that it's more of a straight flare, and I absolutely love these jeans. I wear them all the time. I'm making my third pair right now. And to me, it's a dramatic customization. I put a lot of thought into it, making sure that it was exactly the leg shape that I wanted. I measured a pair of pants that I have that I really, really like and transferred that and made sure that the shape was exactly the way I wanted it. And it's one of those customizations that I'm so glad I tried because it led to a tried and true pattern for me. What about you?
The thing that's coming to mind is, I don't know, maybe 6 or so years ago, I made a dress, and I was following like a McCall's pattern or something like that, and it had like a very fitted bodice and sewn on straps, and I did the first muslin of it, and I was just like, I knew that the shaping to get it to fit my bust and my under bust and contour the way that I wanted it to, that the bodice design just like simply wasn't going to work from a structural standpoint. And so I ended up like re-engineering it into something that had like an inset midriff and darts and gathers in the bust, and like completely re-engineered it. And I remember trying on the final one by the time I had like finished sewing it and being like, wow, this is I might as well have not even started with this pattern. Completely unrecognizable. And it did take me like 1 or 2 more muslins after the initial one to make sure that it was correct, because it was such a redesign. But it was lovely.
Yeah. And then once you make those, if you are going for one of these more dramatic customizations and you do spend the time to test it out and make it just the way you want it, then you have this pattern that you can use again and again.
Right.
If you want to. All right, well, let's get into our tips, because we have a lot of really cool ideas that are actually very simple to do and might not require all of this testing. So these are ways that you can customize patterns that you already have, you already love, or if there's something new that you want to try, maybe a basic that you want to add something special to, these ideas will all help you out. So the first one, I love this one, which is adding decorative top stitching on top of gathers. So I think this look is really cool. I've seen it a lot on vintage garments. And what gave me the inspiration for this is in the spring, I made my first hand smocked garment. It was a Madu top, which I gathered and smocked by hand. It was really beautiful, but it took a very, very long time to do. So I started thinking about similar looks and came across the idea of adding rows of decorative stitching on top of a gathered area. So rather than smocking, which is very precise and it's more of an embroidery technique, this would be just rows of straight stitching, or you could use a fancy embroidery stitch on your machine and stitch it on top of gathers. It's not going to look like smocking, but it has that same kind of vibe. And it is something that I've seen a lot on vintage garments. In fact, I made a pattern many, many years ago from the 1930s that had this detail on it. It had gathers at the shoulders and then rows of parallel top stitching on top of those gathers. And it looked really, really pretty. I think it would look also really pretty on the shoulders of Kit, for example, which has those gathered shoulders. So that's kind of like a similar look to that 1930s dress I just mentioned. You could take those gathers at the shoulder and just add some rows of top stitching, maybe 3 to 5 rows of top stitching in parallel on top of that. I think that looks really, really pretty. You could even do hand stitching if you wanted to, and use embroidery floss if you wanted something that was a little bit more, that was going to stand out a little bit more. You could also do this on the center front of the Baker smock dress, which also has gathering underneath that front yoke. I think that would also be really, really pretty. The key is just to gather first and then add your decorative stitching on top. So it gives you that heirloom look, but without all the handwork. So I think it's a really pretty, really fun, and really easy thing to do.
Oh, I love that like little heirloom shortcut.
Yeah.
All right. Our next idea is to create a dramatic row of pin tucks. I love the look of pin tucks, but I think that they look even more like dramatic when there are a ton of them. If you have a pin tuck foot, you can use it to create several rows of pin tucks to add texture to a simple fabric. You can even add horizontal pin tucks for a different effect. I've even seen pin tuck grids. Which is also, I think, like really beautiful and lovely. thinking about adding them to like a bodice of a simple dress, or you can even put them on the hem of a skirt. I feel like there's lots of applications and like places that you could use pin tucks on the hem of a sleeve. The options are really endless, and you could have a lot of fun playing with different placements here. You can also head over to our YouTube channel to see our video on pin tucks if you want to see this technique in action. Sari, have you ever tried your hand at pin tucks?
Oh, yeah. I've done both pin tucks by hand. So on the baker top and the baker dress that I made. No, the baker top. I added pin tucks instead of the gathering.
Oh, cute.
To the center front. And I think it looks really, really pretty. So that's another little thing you can do. If you have an area that's gathered, you could add tucks instead, or pin tucks instead of gathers for kind of a different look. I'm working on a bloom blouse right now as well, and that has pin tucks on the front as well. So that's another thing. I didn't have a pin tuck foot for a long time, but I got one recently, and I really like it for just doing those really tiny, delicate little pin tucks. It's just so pretty, and it's very easy to do with the pin tuck foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out the video that Haley just mentioned, because we go over everything pin tucks in that video. All right, for our next detail, I really love this one, which is trying frog closures. I'm really obsessed with frog closures right now. I think they're kind of on trend at the moment, and I think they're very, very pretty. It's a really easy way to fancy up any garment that closes up the front. I think it would look beautiful on the auto vest or on the lilac dress, which already has a built-in modesty panel. So instead of the buttons and loops down the front of that dress, you could add frog closures instead. And I think it would be really, really pretty. I think they look particularly great on a jacket, a shirt, or a vest, though. I think they're just gorgeous. Especially, there's something about the white on white or black on black ones that I think looks really, really elegant, especially with something like silk, if you're working with a really luxurious fabric, or wool or something like that. So frog closures, if you're not familiar with them, you're probably familiar with them, but they're kind of a coiled closure that are made with some kind of tape. They're either made with like a bias tape type thing, or with some kind of cording. So you can make your own with bias tape if you want, or you can buy them ready-made. They're usually not very expensive, and they instantly will give a garment a more formal and kind of vintage-inspired look that I think is very beautiful.
I love the idea of making them yourself. I feel like that would be such like a fun handwork project to do in front of the fireplace.
I know, especially if you used matching fabrics. If you had like a colorful dress and then a colorful matching frog closure, wouldn't that look amazing?
Stop. It'd be so cute. I love that. Well, speaking of like cool hand done details, I love the idea of adding hand-stitched top stitching to a project. This looks so pretty in a contrasting color like white thread on a navy fabric. And the look of hand stitching rather than precise machine stitching, I just find it to be so beautiful. It takes more time, but it's such a meditative process, and the results, I think, are so, so worth it. I like it on like tailored things, and that's where you'll find it often in vintage garments, like along the lapels of a jacket, or on a pocket edge, or even on hemlines, or even just top stitching along like construction seams. I think that this is so pretty. I used to have a vintage shift dress that was someone had obviously handmade it at home, and it was a brown kind of like canvas, and then it had white hand-done top stitching, and it was so pretty.
Sounds beautiful.
Sari, what's your favorite way to add a hand-stitched detail to a garment?
You mentioned tailored garments, and I think that is kind of like a classic place for them, is adding pick stitching to a lapel, a wool coat, or something like that. It just looks really fancy and nice. I have a camel coat that I inherited from my grandmother that has pick stitching all around the lapels and the down the front, and it's just beautiful. But I think another thing, I recently just wrote our video that we're putting, it'll be out by the time you guys are listening to this, I think, about sewing plackets. And I was looking at a lot of plackets and I saw some that had this kind of hand stitching detail down the front of, you could either do it on each side of the placket on a shirt, for example, or you could even just do a row of running stitch just down the middle of the placket. And I think it looks really cool and it's really pretty easy to do. It doesn't take a ton of time compared to other, kind of embroidery techniques you might do. And you could do it in a contrasting thread or you could do it in a matching thread. And I think it looks really pretty.
That's such a cool texture. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, on a pocket too, like on a shirt pocket. You could do the placket and then you could do it along the top of the pocket. And I think that'd be really pretty.
The vintage dress I was talking about had patch pockets, and it was how the pockets were attached and also like the top edge of them. It was very cute.
Very cool. All right, the next one is to create rickrack hem. So hear me out on this because rickrack I think is very controversial and it can have a very crafty look, but I saw this recently on a garment and I thought it was just so cool. What you can do is take large rickrack, so really big rickrack in a color that matches the hem of the dress or the skirt, and you sew it to it and it gives us this really beautiful scallop effect. It looks like scallops on the edge of your dress. So, or skirt or whatever it is you're making. And it's like this it's it's an instant decorative trim, but it adds all this movement and visual interest and it looks a lot more interesting than it seems like it would. So, I think the important thing is choosing rickrack that's proportional to your garment. So, bigger rickrack for a longer hem and maybe something with more volume. And then you could use something that was smaller for a shorter hem. And I think that would look really good. But I really like this look, especially when it matches the garment. So it just looks like part of the garment rather than this bright rickrack that's sewn to the edge and stands out.
I have a ton of rickrack inspiration on my various Pinterest boards. And I love it so much. I saw someone, or I saw some pants those kind of like athletic looking pull-on pants with like the stripes down the side, like Adidas kind of style, are very trending right now, styled with like button-ups and stuff. And I saw a pair that was rickrack instead of like a top stitched bias on the side. And I thought it was such a fun like take.
That's really cool
on that trend.
Yeah, I love that idea. If I were still a runner, I would make track pants like that.
I love it even more in the context of it being for actual athletic wear.
That would be so funny.
All right. Our next idea is to add lace hems. Sari, I know that you're doing this yourself on your bias cut desi soon, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing on mine. I think this is a really cool detail and very easy to add.
So easy. So basically you just sew scalloped lace to the hem using like a little tiny zigzag stitch around the curves. And then you cut away the fabric beneath and it looks great with silk. But I also think it would be like really cool on a pair of like Joss pants, like a more unexpected application. And it's so elegant. It's such a great way to finish a hem, especially on like a more flowing garment. I love the idea of like silk Joss pants with like a big chunky lace hem.
Absolutely. I think that would be really, really pretty. Or velvet. That'd be really pretty. I have a pair of silk Joss pants that I made last year, I want to say. Black silk, just for around the house wear. And they're very elegant.
Yeah, perfect for like swanning about.
Which is what I like to do.
Me too.
Around the house.
Same.
The next one is one that I personally really love, which is try a contrasting collar. So for a dress down version, this is what I'm really drawn to. You could make a chore coat with a corduroy collar. I love chore coats. Big fan of a chore coat. Love a classic Eddie Bauer jacket. I have several old 90s Eddie Bauer jackets, and I really love the way they look with a corduroy collar, or you could do a Sherpa collar. Our Bud jacket that one of our samples we made, it's a corduroy jacket, and then it has a Sherpa collar, and it looks really cool. Or if you wanted to do something dressier, You could use a blouse like Romy and do like a velvet color or something really fancy like that. I think that would be really pretty for the holidays. Wouldn't that be gorgeous?
Collar?
Yeah, that would be so beautiful. You could also try different prints, like a floral collar on a solid shirt, for example. And it's such a simple change that just completely transforms the look of the garment. I really think this is something we could all probably think about a little bit more if you're sewing anything with a collar, whether you want to change out that collar and make it a little bit of more of a standout.
I love that. I love like little contrasting moments like that as a way of like upgrading something. You can even do a cuff or something like that.
It's so easy and it makes it look so intentional.
Yes, agreed. All right, our next idea is to make braided straps. So if you're making something that has spaghetti straps, you can just swap them out for some braided straps. So instead of making one tube per strap, you make 3 narrower ones and then braid them together. It adds a lot of visual interest and it feels more substantial than a standard strap. You could even use different colors or textured strands for the braid. For instance, like if you used a satin for one of the strands, so you have like kind of like a little contrast of texture in there, I think would be really pretty.
Yeah, that would be gorgeous. I had a top, it was a bias cut tank, like a spaghetti strap tank that had braided straps like that. And it was so pretty. I loved it. And because it's braided, it has some natural stretch to it. So even if you cut the strands on the straight grain and not on the bias, they'll still stretch because of the braid, which is kind of nice. The next idea is adding an overlay. So instead of making something in a single layer, you could add a sheer layer on top for an overlay. So for example, you could make a skirt and a bold floral print and then add a layer of sheer silk on top to just kind of mute it a bit and add kind of a wash of color over the top. I really love this look. You see it a lot on dresses from, well, not a lot, you see it sometimes on dresses from the 50s and 60s, this style, and I just think it's really gorgeous and not used that much today. Or you could use a sheer overlay to just add, some color variation to the dress. So if you have something in, you have like a floral print, for example, in a color that you're not crazy about, you can add that overlay to just give it slightly different tone. And it's kind of like having 2 garments in one. You get a really kind of different look just by adding that extra layer. So I really like this look, especially on skirts, like a full skirt. I think it's very, very pretty.
I was looking at some like inspiration for tops recently, and I saw this fitted mesh kind of like shell tank, and it was reversible, and you got like a little peek of the lining fabric from underneath, and I thought it was so cute. I imagined doing Aronica in a stretch mesh and doing like, like maybe burgundy on one side and like mauve or something on the other. I think sometimes we forget about our sheer our sheer knits for applications like this too.
Yes, I've been thinking about stretch mesh actually, because I had, when I like back in the early 2000s, I had this stretch mesh top from, I think it was from Anthropologie, and it was sheared on the sides. So it was like mesh and sheared. So it was like really comfy because it was knit, but it's just really like a beautiful look to it and really hugged the body really beautifully. It was really nice.
I love that.
And I've been thinking about how could I make something similar to that?
Yeah, I was on the quest for like some cute date night tops, which led me down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Of like cool mesh tops, because I thought like, oh, it's like wearing like a knit top.
Yeah.
But like cute and sexy. I like it.
Yeah, I found a pattern that would have been perfect for it. It's like an 80s pattern, but it was only available that I could find online in a really, really tiny size. So I'm going to keep my eye out for it.
I love that. I love like the texture of that. All right. Our last, but like not least idea is to not forget about the pockets. People often forget that you can add pockets to almost anything. Inseam pockets are really practical, but you can also add patch pockets or welt pockets if you want something that's like more like more visible, more of a design element. You can sew a small chest pocket on a blouse or a dress, or big patch pockets on a pair of pants. I'm a big fan of patch pockets. I think they're so fun and playful. And welt pockets instantly really make any garment look more tailored and elevated. And we just had a whole workshop for you if you've never sewn them before. So definitely check that out if you are a newbie to sewing welt pockets. Sari, what is your favorite type of pocket to add?
I love all pockets. I'm a big pocket fan, but I also like patch pockets. I think there's so much you can do with them.
Yeah.
They're really easy to add to anything since they're kind of just on the surface and they won't distort the line of your garment. Inseam pockets are very easy and they're hidden, but sometimes they will kind of distort the line depending on the style. But I really like patch pockets and they're fun to play with. You can do different shapes. You can add details to them. You can add applique to them. They're a lot of fun. So that's probably my favorite style of pocket.
Yeah, I feel like it's like really like, they're really fun. I'm always on any design when I'm like in the iterating process. I feel like I always have like 20 different variations on patch pockets and scale and shape and all.
Yeah, I really like them. But welt pockets obviously look gorgeous. So I'm not anti-welt. Some people are anti-welt pocket because they are fiddly. They are a little bit of work, but once you've done them, they're just very satisfying.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm very particular about the technique I like to use, but I am a fan.
Yeah. All right, so we've covered 10 ways to add pizzazz to your favorite patterns, from decorative top stitching and pin tucks, contrasting details and creative closures. We talked about lace hems, overlays, and the power of adding pockets to transform any garment. I think my big takeaway from this episode is that sewing it's really all about decisions. Each of these customizations is just another creative decision that you can make to express your own style in your own personal way. You don't have to stick exactly to the pattern. You can make choices that really reflect who you are and what you love at this moment for yourself at this moment in time. What about you, Haley? What's your big takeaway?
I would say that my big takeaway is pretty similar, that I think it's the spirit of like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? I think most of us turn to sewing because we don't like things as they are offered. But then sometimes I see people, they come into sewing and they have like these big like aspirations, and then they get like a little bit in the weeds with the technical side of things, and learning techniques and becoming like, proficient at it as a craft. And I think that's all like wonderful and worthwhile pursuits. But I think it's important to not lose the fun of it when you're like in the throes of becoming a good, I'm using air quotes, good sewer. So why not? Why not add rickrack? Why not make heart-shaped patch pockets? I don't know. Follow your heart and do something fun. And I think that there should be an element of every project, even if it's the simplest project in the world, that like brings you joy.
Yeah.
That feels like you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the design process comes in for me, and incorporating design more into your sewing is that it really gives you a sense of freedom and also kind of puts some of that fun and creativity back into sewing if that's something that's been missing for you, if you've been getting too in the weeds, or even losing confidence in yourself because, your projects aren't turning out the way you want or your techniques aren't absolutely perfect. I think having some kind of process where you just get to be creative and come up with your own vision of how you want things to be can be really freeing and put some of that fun back. So, all right, well, we've talked about many ways to customize your patterns today. And if you've been inspired to try some of these techniques, now is the perfect time to stock up on supplies and patterns. Our Black Friday sale is going on right now, and we're offering 50% off everything in our shop, including our annual Seamwork memberships. So if you've been thinking about joining and getting access to all our patterns, all of our workshops, our whole community, this is the perfect time. You'll have hundreds of patterns to customize and a whole community of sewists to share ideas with, not to mention the Design Your Wardrobe process, which I was just talking about, and which, as you guys know, I like to evangelize because I think it is so fun. All right. Well, if you liked this episode, please leave us a review. We absolutely love hearing from you guys. And those reviews on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, they really, really help other people to find the show. So if you enjoy the show, that's the number one thing you can do to say hello and at the same time, let other people know about it. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. That's where I post lots of helpful sewing videos as well as what I am working on personally. You can also follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join and check out that Black Friday sale that I just mentioned. It's going on right now. All right, well, that's it. That's it for us this week. I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.